Good. Working this time. Didn't work last week. Good morning. Today is June the 12th, 2022. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'd like to apologize first and foremost. Last week, I had some technical issues. My computer was running very slowly during the stream, and I did not understand why. After the stream had finished, I came to realize the issue. Something had gone wrong with the YouTube stream or upload. I'm not sure what the terminology is. And unfortunately, I didn't capture last week's webinar on YouTube. So it doesn't exist. For anybody who tried to look for it, it was not captured. And for that, I'm sorry. We're working on finding a better solution for how I currently do it, because right now the software I use, pardon me, seems to be a little bit buggy. I received some awesome feedback from some of the attendees of the seminar about ways in which I could improve. And one of the things I heard loud and clear was that the YouTube stream, if you missed the live seminar and you want to go back and watch it at a later time, doesn't capture what I'm sharing with you on my screen. If we're going through an analysis or we're talking about something that I'm showing you from my computer rather than just my lovely face, I wasn't capturing that for the YouTube video or record. And so I'm going to look into some, I guess it's called professional streaming software, and see if we can't improve that aspect of things and maybe improve this. I don't want to call it a product, but the experience that you get from these seminars and where you can find it and interact with it. Pardon me. I wanted to start today just with a simple passage here from one of my books. This is a daily. Why is this not working? This is a daily reader. Let's try that again. So this is a daily reader, and I just want to read this passage really quickly and see what you think of it. And in the meantime, this is hold on a second. Why is this? There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't know. I had the speakers there doing a little reverb thing. So first thing, I'm just going to read you this very, very quick passage. And this is from Epictetus. I've read you some of his thoughts before. Epictetus lived like 3,500 years ago. He was born into slavery. He was a Greek slave. Epictetus was a Greek slave. Roman slave. My apologies. Lived like 2,500 years ago, born into slavery, died one of the richest men in the Republic. And what he said was, "In this way, you must understand how laughable it is to say, 'Tell me what to do.' What advice could I possibly give? No, a far better request is, train my mind to adapt to any circumstance. In this way, if circumstances take you off script, you won't be desperate for new prompting." I think that's pretty solid advice, right? What he's saying really is a trained mind is better than any script, right? And obviously, each of us has been through the process of, well, I was going to call it education, but I'm going to call it schooling. We've been through schooling, and in schooling, they train you to follow a script. This is what they do. And they teach you in life that you just follow a script and it takes you places, right? So they've got all kinds of recipes. One of the recipes is go to school, get good grades, go to university, get good grades, go to graduate school, get good grades, get a good job, profit, right? This would be one of the scripts. Another one would be go to school, get good grades, go to university, get good grades, get a good job, profit, right? So there's a lot of these. There's go to work, follow the rules, don't ruffle any feathers, profit, right? So these are kind of some of the scripts that we teach people about how to get by in life, right? And obviously, I think we all recognize that there is some wisdom in some of these scripts, right? Certainly, working hard at whatever you do is a good idea, whether it's schooling, whether it's your job, whether it's some entrepreneurial activity you're investing. Working hard is beneficial, right? And we all gain something from putting in an honest, hard day's work. At the same time, right, the script of go to school, get an education, get your degree, get your job, profit, it is a surefire recipe to not be homeless. It will do that for you. And that in itself is an accomplishment. So I don't want to knock the wisdom too hard. Excuse me. But it is absolutely not a recipe for getting ahead in life, right? And so we have to be very careful of the scripts that we follow, right? And of which paths preset by other people we choose to walk. Life in general tends to reward, although it can also punish, leadership, right? Going down, I don't want to say the road less traveled, because that's a cliche from a poem that is strongly or largely misunderstood. But when you walk the uncommon path in life, that is where the opportunity for discovery lies, right? And it is those of us who discover, the adventurers, the explorers, the pioneers, who truly succeed, right? In at least the narrow definition of success, where we mean materially and competitively, right? If you want to say that you're a success in life because you raise a family and you're a good person, that's a form of success I absolutely subscribe to, and I believe that you do not need to be, super materially successful for me to consider you a success if that's what you were aiming at, right? But if we're talking about success, certainly in material terms, and I think a lot of the times I just prefaced this by saying, you're still successful if you have a family and all these things. Yeah, you certainly are, right? But you haven't impacted the world in the way that I don't know, let's say Steve Jobs or Elon Musk has done, right? I saw this really funny exchange. I was reading some article about Elon Musk buying Twitter. I'm sure you've all heard of this by now. It's been going on for a month or two. And somebody was complaining, and they were saying, I can't believe Elon Musk would spend $44 billion on Twitter. Do you know how much you could help the environment with all that money? And I was killing myself laughing at this comment, because I was like, does this young woman realize that Elon Musk single-handedly almost, I mean, there were a couple of people who handed him, but it was really his vision and his drive created the electrical vehicle industry, something which has not saved the environment yet, but it's got the potential to. If we'll move away from using fossil fuels to generate the electricity, we could, use solar and nuclear and the various ways to get away from fossil fuels. She's unaware of this. He also runs one of the largest solar companies in the world, one of the largest battery providers in the world. I mean, the man has done more to move the needle on climate change probably than anybody else. But ironically, he still has his detractors. But that's a type of success I think that we can all look at and we can admire, not because of the number of zeros on his bank account or because of how famous and popular he is, although both of those things are impressive, but because ultimately and at the end of the day, I mean, he set out with a goal, and I don't know what goal he set out with when he was, 19 and working on X.com, which would eventually become PayPal. I can't comment on that. But he set out with a goal. We know exactly what his goal was because he was already a public figure when he started Tesla. He wanted to reduce our climate impact by getting the world to switch over to electric vehicles. And today in the year 2022, I've got to tell you, he succeeded. I think Volkswagen is planning by the end of the year to have an electric vehicle in all of their product lines. Volkswagen probably still is the largest automotive manufacturer in the world. They go up and down with Toyota, I think. So it might be Toyota as well. But Toyota's in the exact same position. All of the major automotive players are now making battery electric vehicles. And that was Elon Musk's vision, right? So again, a trained mind is better than any script, right? And just to follow on to that, Elon Musk obviously did not follow a script. There was no script for battery electric vehicles. What he did was use his well-trained mind to look at the problem from first principles and try to solve the problem, right? Obviously, most of us are not looking to act on the scale that Elon Musk is acting on. Probably most of us are not as smart as Elon Musk. Maybe none of us, right? But the principle still stands, right? It is by applying ourselves to those things which people do not usually apply themselves to, where the opportunity for profit and growth is found, right? And certainly, if we take real estate investing as an example, I want you to understand, right, that the top 5% of real estate investors in Canada own 2 or more multifamily properties, right? That means if you buy 3 multifamily properties, you're in the 1%. In the top 5% of Canadian real estate investors, right? So even to take something as simple as real estate investing, right? A lot of people get excited about, get interested in. When I say a lot of people, I mean, we're still talking about less than 20% of the population, but people do, and they go out and they buy one. They buy one house, maybe they rent it out, maybe they buy a house, they rent out the basement, they live upstairs, various ways that people get involved, but they stop there because that's the script, right? A lot of people learned, oh, okay, you know what? My grandparents rented out their basement. That's something that I can do. And they'll do that, and it will advantage them. I probably don't need to reiterate all the advantages of real estate investing to you, but they'll do this, but then they'll stop, right? And, I was thinking earlier this week, and I try to kind of reflect and record my thoughts on a weekly basis. I think it's a good practice and something that I came up with, and I probably got it from somewhere else. But I realized that so much of life has very little to do with aptitude and much to do with attitude, right? We accomplish more to defeat ourselves with 15 minutes of bad attitude and negative thinking than a silver spoon and a high IQ at birth can ever do for us, right? There's a fantastic story. If you'll bear with me for just a minute, you may have heard this before. It's certainly not my story. It's quite famous, but there was a gentleman. He owned a cosmetics conglomerate. He ended up being a multi-millionaire, like hundreds of millions of dollars we're talking about. Okay, he was in school. He was basically failing out of high school. He was about 16 years old. So what's that, grade 10? In America, I think that's called a freshman. And he was basically failing out of high school. And, his mother was giving him a hard time. And she said, look, son, I understand this whole school thing doesn't seem to be for you, but please just write the SATs for me. So if you're not familiar, the SAT is the standardized admission test in the United States. It's scored on a scale up to like 1600 or something like that. And everybody who wants to go to college has to write this test. So it's kind of like, it's like any kind of standard admissions test. We've got them here as well. We don't call them SATs, but we've got similar kind of tests in Canada. Anyways, he said, okay, Mom, I'll write the SAT. He went to the test, wrote his SAT, got his results a few weeks later. He scored a 1480. Now, we're not Americans, so I'll translate 1480, good score. So 1600 scale, a 1480 is excellent. You're like in the top 10% or 5% of students who write this test. So you're basically a very smart person. You get a 1480. So he gets this test result back. And his mom, says to him, I always knew you were a bright boy. I didn't know you had that in you, but obviously you should maybe take school a little more seriously, right? And he said, you know what? You're right, Mom. I didn't know I was so smart. I'm going to take school more seriously. So he started studying his his senior year now. So sorry, it wasn't freshman. He was a junior. So now his senior year, so that'd be like grade 12. He goes to school and he starts studying because he's smart. He's going to go places, right? He stops hanging out with his burnout friends. He stops, smoking at the pit, whatever it is. Stops, partying and drinking. Starts taking school seriously. He studies. He works hard. He gets good grades. Graduates. Goes to school. Gets his degree. Comes in not top of his class, but very close to the top of his class. Works his butt off. Ends up starting this business. makes millions of dollars. 20 years later, a letter comes in the mail to his mom. So in the United States, the body that administers these tests does audits sometimes on the tests to make sure that the results are honest, to make sure that they're doing everything right. And so 20 years later, they send this letter to his mother. And the letter says, we regret to inform you that there was an error made in the administration of your son's SAT exams, and he was sent the wrong score. He actually scored a 730. Now, 730 is basically a fail. The kid was an idiot. Turns out that it did not matter how smart or dumb he was. Once he set his mind to the reality or the possibility that he could achieve, and he then worked hard for that achievement, he became successful. And so in telling this story, because he was telling the story in an interview, right? The interviewer said to him, so it was getting that SAT score that changed your life, right? And he stopped him and he said, no, it was when I believed that I could get that SAT score. That's what changed my life. And of course, the rest is history, right? He worked very hard and he eventually became a very, very successful person. And so we have to be very, very careful. If we find ourselves in a hole, the first rule is stop digging, right? If you've made an error, and we all do, don't make it worse. Don't compound it by telling yourself you're dumb or you're stupid or any of the various things. Don't get angry at the circumstance, the people around you, whatever it is. It might be a big ask to sit there and say, you know what, you need to pause and step back and evaluate and strategize your way out of the situation you find yourself in. But we all need to understand how quickly and easily we can use our bad attitude and our negative energy to take a situation and make it worse. It's very, very easy to do that. And it's very easy to handicap ourselves by believing things that limit our potential, when you could easily believe in how limitless your potential is, and understand that people, truly, truly, truly dumb people who you would meet and think are completely unremarkable, make millions of dollars every day by investing in real estate, stocks, cryptocurrency, building businesses, doing all sorts of things that you think are reserved for the sort of elite class of super people. They are not. As the old Gatorade commercial, I remember there used to be a Gatorade commercial, and it was all kind of about like women's equality or whatever, but they'd play the song, anything you can do, I can do better, right? That's not true. I cannot be a better basketball player than LeBron James can, but I can do everything that he does. I can get up early and I can work out all day. And you know what? If I did those things, I'm blessed to be a little bit tall, but I'd probably be in the NBA, right? And I bet you, even for somebody who's 5, 6, 7 inches shorter than me, maybe somebody who's 5'8" or so, right? Where you would think, okay, there are very few people who are that height in the NBA. True. But if that 5'8" person worked as hard as LeBron James did, assuming they didn't injure themselves, they've got a pretty good shot at being a bench warmer on one of those NBA teams, right? Maybe even being, we saw a freak, hardworking guy in Allen Iverson many, many years ago, right? And there have been small people who worked hard obviously this is a sport that advantages really large people, and yet still that hard work pays off, right? It's something that's very important to keep in mind, right? It's just how much one can do with a positive mental attitude, right? And again, to really keep in mind, we shouldn't be hamstringing ourselves with negative thinking, right? You got to be realistic, right? Because delusion does not help you to progress in life, right? You got to be taking accurate measures and having accurate thoughts. But at the same time, we have to be very careful that being quote unquote accurate or realistic is not the same as telling ourselves that we can't do something. Because in truth, the biggest thing that will change your outcome, aside from the luck of not being hit by a bus or lightning tomorrow, right? The biggest thing that's going to impact the outcomes that you get is whether or not you believe that you can get them, or whether or not you believe that you deserve them, right? And if we just to bring it back to real estate investing, I mean, the simplest thing, one of the things that certainly changed for me when I started getting into real estate investing is, how much money are you saving? Do you save 5% of your income? Do you save 10%? Do you save 20? Do you save 50? right? Ideally, in a perfect world, you'd save 80%, right? 90, why not? If you made $20 million a year, you could save 90% of that, right? You'd still have $2 million a year to spend, right? So the question is, how much do you believe you can do it? And then how much are you putting your money where your mouth or your thoughts are, right? Because I can assure you right now, if you're saving 5% of your income, you're not saving enough. If you're saving 10% of your income, you're not saving enough. If you're saving 20% of your income, you're still not saving enough. I aim at a minimum to take 25% out of every single paycheck and put that aside for investing. That's what I do. And that's not enough. I'd like to get to 50. One day I hope I will get there. As I'm able to accumulate more assets and grow the income side of the equation, it becomes easier to save more, right? But the more that you're saving, even if you have no assets at the moment, right? Even if the only asset you have is yourself and you're 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours a day, right? How much of that are you putting aside for yourself in the future? Because if you don't believe that you can be a real estate millionaire, let's just say, right? Then chances are you're putting aside very little to nothing because you're allowing yourself day to day to be distracted by the immediate needs and wants of the moment. And you're not focusing on that future where you can actually be successful, right? That the young man who grew up to be the business mogul, right, with the SAT score, he was living his life day to day, seeking cheap thrills, right? Because he didn't think he was destined for greatness. And when he got that SAT score and he came to believe that he was a smart person who could do great things, he put away those immediate needs and he focused on his future. I will sacrifice today to study. I will sacrifice today to focus on school so that I can get into a good university, right? I will sacrifice in university so I can get good grades. And then when I get out of university, I will sacrifice so I can work hard, so I can save up a nest egg and start my own business, right? That was his attitude. And it paid off for him. It pays off for most people who pursue it, right? But you have to believe and you have to actually take the steps for you to reap the rewards, right? Even if we look at somebody, I love Michael Jordan because, as a kid, I grew up, there was Space Jam, which is a terrible movie, but as a kid, it was fantastic. I loved it. In Space Jam, you've got, at the very beginning of the movie, you've got young Michael Jordan. He's playing basketball. Right? He's playing basketball. He's shooting baskets at the net. And his father comes out. I think his father was a police officer. I don't remember. Anyways, he comes out and talks to Michael. I can't remember what he says because bad movie. I haven't seen it in 20 years. But he basically says to him, you got to come out. You got to practice like this every day if you want to make it. And so the story goes, as Michael Jordan would tell you, that's what he did. He played basketball obsessively, practiced constantly, trained his butt off to eventually be Michael Jordan. Right? And what we all need to understand is that the number one element in life that allowed Michael Jordan to be who he was, it's not the fact that he was tall. It's not the fact that he was fast or strong or really good at basketball, had great basketball IQ, a good sense of team play, and an amazing competitive spirit. No, you can find all of those things in a prison yard. What made the difference was that he believed, he had faith that he could do it, that if he did those little things day to day, they would pay off as big things later down the road, right? And you see this theme repeated time and time again. If you look at Kobe O'Bryant, right, who unfortunately passed away too soon just a few years ago, he essentially said the same thing, and he'll tell you. He tells you, actually, there's a great interview of him with Patrick Bet-David. If you're not familiar with the YouTube channel Valuetainment, Patrick Bet-David is a multi-millionaire insurance entrepreneur, and he has Valuetainment is this awesome kind of show that he does where he talks to different famous people and successful people and asks them about their success and how to build a business, etc. And so he's one of the last people to have interviewed Kobe O'Bryant. They did an interview about him and his investing and his basketball career, of course. And Kobe tells him a story about his first year in the league. And they made it to the playoffs. And they were playing a series, and it came down to, I think it went to game 7. I don't remember the specific details, but In that game, basically, they gave Kobe the ball to take the final shot of the game. This was the shot they were either going to win or they were going to lose based on whether or not he got this shot in. And, he shot this shot a million times throughout the season, sunk it, blah, blah, blah. He played it, when he was in high school, same shot. And he went to shoot the shot, and it came up short. And so he missed it, and they were eliminated that season. And he said to Patrick, he said, I knew I could make that shot. I'd made it a million times before, but it was different playing in the NBA because we had to play 82 games in a season. And coming from high school where I had only had to play like 30 something games and I got lots of time to rest and recover, I came to the realization that I could do it, but I had to increase my strength and my stamina and my legs so that they wouldn't be tired at the end of the game and I could get the elevation I needed to get the shot in the basket. Kobe went to the gym the next day, started training his legs. He trained and he trained and he trained, strengthened his legs all summer long. And when he came back the next year, he hit that shot. I mean, he didn't have to take, obviously, the exact same shot, but he hit that shot, right? It was his faith that he could do it that enabled him to take action day in and day out so that he could build up to the place where he could have the success, right? And so it is so important, your positive mental attitude, right? That will enable you. Because one of the things that's truly so important is the faith component, because you're going to take action that is not going to produce any results. It is not going to produce any results. You're going to analyze real estate properties. It's not producing any results. You're going to make offers. They're not going to get accepted, right? You're going to make offers, and finally it will get accepted. You're going to buy this property. It's a piece of crap now. You need to now spend money. You're spending a bunch of money on this property. You got to have faith that this is going to pay off, because right now you're just dumping more and more money into this thing. Who knows what's going to happen, right? And now you give it some time, right? You've done your calculations. You know that what should happen. So you now are faithful, and now you give it some time. You finish your renovations. Oh, this property starts looking good. Oh, this is coming together. Okay. Now you get some tenants, and oh, they're starting to pay me. I'm getting a check. Oh, okay. There's maybe no cash flow. Maybe I'm breaking even, or maybe I'm just not paying the huge expense I was paying. I'm just getting to a point where it's like very manageable, right? But now we're building towards something, right? And then as time goes on, that faith is rewarded. In the case of the last couple of years, you'll see great appreciation. Now all of a sudden you're going, okay, look, my property is worth 30% more than what I paid for it 2 years ago, right? Or, okay, it's been a year and a half. I finally stabilized this property. Now it's cash flowing $300 a month, $100 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is, right? You have to have that faith, or you're going to quit. You're going to be discouraged well before you ever make it to the point where you get the payoff from the hard work, right? And so many of us start out on a project with the best of intentions, make it 80% of the way to the finish line, and stop. We quit. We quit just short of the goal. And we don't realize that most of life is a flat, very, very slow, very gradual increase, and then a quick climb to an asymptote. That's what life is mostly like. You're working, and nothing's really happening, and then all of a sudden you get a spike, right? If we take, again, LeBron James or Michael Jordan, from a young age, they were working, playing basketball, devoting their lives to it. They weren't going out to parties, they weren't doing this or that, because they were focused, and it didn't pay anything, right? They would have gone to high school with kids who probably had more money than them, right? Because maybe they got into drug dealing or they started their own little business or whatever. And so they were out having fun and doing stuff. LeBron and Michael had to ignore them. They had to just keep on their track. And then all of a sudden, they become professional basketball players, right? It just jumps up, it spikes up. Elon Musk, I love to talk about Elon Musk. I've told you before about SpaceX, how SpaceX almost didn't happen, right? How he almost went bankrupt, launched three rockets. They all failed. Went to go launch the fourth one, and if that didn't go through for him, he was literally going to go broke. He was sleeping on his friend's couch. That's how little money he had. Elon Musk's trajectory with SpaceX and Tesla, nothing happened. Richest man in the world, right? So you have to understand that to accomplish anything of significance in life, and this is true. I mean, you think about your own life, you'll see it for yourself. You see this pattern repeated everywhere. You're going to work hard with no reward, very little feedback, very little payoff. And then all of a sudden things just coalesce and something great happens. So if you don't have that trust in yourself, that faith component, you're not going to get there. Now, I mentioned in my email, I was going to talk to you about this interesting conversation I had with an Uber driver. I was taking an Uber this week, and I got in the car with this Uber driver. He was driving an Uber X. Yeah, I think that's like the cheap Uber. I'm not a big Uber person, so I think I got the Uber X. It was a cheap Uber, and he was driving me into the city, and he was telling me, that basically my trip was like the perfect time for him because he just started. He Ubers like full time, and he wanted to go into the city because that's where he makes most of his money, right? And he's coming from Oakville. That's where he lives. And so I was just talking to him kind of about the business and what it was like. And he was a very personable guy, and he was kind of telling me about it. And he said, he used to drive his Uber in Hamilton. That was his primary place where he would do the Ubers, right? And he noticed one day that he got a trip that took him to Toronto, and he made a lot more money, right? And so he thought, okay, what's going on here? And so I guess Uber provides the drivers with all the data and statistics of how they're getting paid for each of their trips, so they can go back and account and see how much money they're making, right? So he said he went back and he checked, and they were paying, I can't remember the exact numbers, but they were paying like 80 to 90 cents per kilometer for trips in Hamilton, right? And he said he took a look at the numbers, and they were paying like $1.20 or so for trips in the GTA. And so he said, okay, well, clearly there's a difference there, right? So it would be beneficial to do more trips in the GTA because the rate is higher, right? And then he looked into it, and they pay a booking fee for these larger Ubers. So I guess they get like $5 just when you push on the app and say, I want your car, right? So he said, well, in Toronto, this booking fee was larger. I don't know, I guess $5 in Toronto. It was like $2 or $3 in Hamilton. So he said, okay, that makes sense for me. I'm going to move my business, whatever, side hustle, whatever you want to call it, from Hamilton, and I'm going to now focus on Toronto because there's more opportunity there. There's more money to be made, right? And so he makes the shift. He makes the transition. So he's been doing this now for like a month. So it's pretty fresh what he was talking to me. I said, okay, that's really neat. So he goes into Toronto. He's telling me, it's interesting driving in Toronto because you would think that my most profitable days would be Friday and Saturday, right? And he said, but in fact, they're actually Thursday and Saturday. For some reason, Friday is not as good of a day, right? And so he was saying that, on Thursday, I seem to do really well. I guess people starting to get into that weekend mood. They're going out partying, whatever. So there's a lot of business into the night, and so I get paid quite well. Same thing with on Saturdays, but for some reason on Fridays, I make a lot of my money from surge pricing, and the surge pricing just isn't as good on Fridays, right? And so in my head, I'm doing my whole like economics thing. I'm like thinking about, okay, supply and demand. I know that Uber uses their algorithm to try and match drivers with people who want to take rides, and so there's clearly something going on here, right? And I'm sure we can mathematically work it out if I could see the formula. Obviously, I can't do that, but this is one thing in my head. So I'm asking him, why do you think that is, etc. And he goes, I'm not really sure. And I said, could it be that on Friday, there's a bunch of like part-timers who are thinking, hey, it's Friday. Maybe I'll fire up Uber and I can make a little bit of extra money. There's probably lots of people out and about. Right? And he said, oh, no, I don't think that's it. Like, I'm just as busy, on the Fridays as I am on the Thursdays, right? And I thought that was the most fascinating thing because up until this point in the conversation, this gentleman, well, he was very lucid and he was very clear. It was very obvious to me that he understood his business, right? That he had a very good understanding of it, of the actual business side of it, and that he was keeping good track and good records of what he was doing and what was working for him and what wasn't. And so it was really confusing for me to hear him say, no, he didn't think that it was because there were drivers firing up the app on Friday that he was making less money, right? Now, this is a clear market force, right? Supply and demand. The higher the supply in relation to demand, the lower the price will fall, and vice versa, right? There's an inverse relationship between supply and demand. So on Fridays, people are firing up the app and they're part-timing, they're moonlighting, right? And so even though there are more buyers, right, there's more demand, there's also more supply. And so to his eyes, the app is keeping him just as busy as it always does because it's working to keep the drivers as busy as it can, right? The algorithm or whatever. So to his eyes, he's just as busy as ever. But in reality, in the marketplace, there are both more drivers and more customers. And so his fare or his rate falls or stays the same, right? In this case, it falls. Now, my guess is, obviously none of us have the data, but my guess is that on Friday, there's a bunch of enthusiastic part-timers who say, hey, it's Friday, lots of people are going to be out, let me go drive. Then they get out. They don't make as much money as they were expecting to because there's this huge surge, there's this large spike in supply. And then on Saturday, they're discouraged, so they don't bother to go out. And then on Saturday, there's the surge, and so he makes more money that day. But to me, it was fascinating that to him, this process was completely invisible. He didn't see it. He didn't understand it. And again, like I said, he was otherwise very astute about his business. And so it got me to thinking about how economic forces and factors are completely invisible to us in our day-to-day lives, right? One of the challenges that a lot of people face is that we don't understand the ways in which we're being influenced economically and where that influence is coming from, right? A perfect example would be gas prices. Obviously, gas prices are well, they're out of control, really. And unfortunately, that's hurting people, especially lower income people. But gas prices have gotten very, very high, right? And people don't understand why. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's Putin's fault. This is Russia. Gas prices are up. I mean, I'm not saying Russia doesn't have something to do with it. They probably do. I mean, everything has something to do with it. But the gas prices are not up 25% year on year because of Russia. This was not the reason why. I mean, the real reason why is because both here in Canada and in the United States, we've both elected governments who've been very, very hostile to expanding the oil supply, right? Whether it's shutting down pipelines like Keystone XL or the one in British Columbia that Justin Trudeau's and the Liberal government shut down, to introducing more stringent carbon taxation and sequestration requirements, which is something that the Biden administration has done, to basically putting a moratorium on greenlighting any more gas production projects in the United States, which is something that the Biden administration has done. All of these things result in a decrease in supply. Now, demand has remained more or less the same, right? It doesn't really change that much. I mean, more people get cars every year because people are being pulled out of poverty in poorer countries, and so they're getting the opportunity to buy a vehicle. But in general, the demand's remaining relatively stable, right? And certainly very predictable, right? But unfortunately, we keep hamstringing the supply. And so to your average person, it looks like prices have gotten really high. And unfortunately, that's not the case. I'm really sorry. Hang on a second. Looks like there is somebody at the door. I'll be right back. Okay. I'm really sorry about that. Neighbor wanted to know if they could use my parking spot. So where was I? Sorry. So we have these these economic or market forces that are in play in our lives, and your average person is completely unaware of how or why they emerge, or what their root cause is. Right now, why am I talking about that on a real estate investing seminar? Right. Well, I think it's very important because right now we're in a moment economically that is not unique. These things happen all the time. the economy is cyclical. Certainly, I think there's the economy side of the equation, and there's the political side of the equation. And politics are not as cyclical as the economy is. Things change, and sometimes even in novel ways. I certainly think that for the last couple of years, we've had governments, both in Canada and the United States, who've been somewhat openly hostile to the oil and gas industry. And so they're doing some things that are maybe not unprecedented, because the American government did a similarly foolish thing in the 70s. But that really, it doesn't follow that same like neat sort of 10 to 12 year cycle that the kind of business and economic cycle follows, right? So as these things interplay, we're getting less predictable results. That is less than that 10-year business cycle that we're kind of used to focusing on as a result of the interplay between politics and the economy. But all the same, at this point in time in the economy, we're at a point where interest rates are increasing, right? We're in an inflationary period. The central planners or the central bankers need to control inflation, right? And so they're using monetary policy to do that, right? That's increasing interest rates. It's probably, they will probably take a half measure, that is, because the history of these things is that the central authorities never do the right thing because it's not explicitly in their interest. And so, I mean, we're seeing that here in Canada, I would say. Interest rates should have been hiked a long time ago. They shouldn't have been as low as they were. They're being held artificially low because it was to the benefit of the government. Politicians in general, and this is an insight that I got from Walter Williams. He's unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but Walter Williams was an American economist, writer, and thinker. And he wrote a book called All It Takes Is Guts. So it's an interesting book. It's a little dated because it's a collection of articles that he wrote in the 80s and 90s. And maybe there were even some from the late 70s, but from an economic perspective, and him just kind of talking about the economy and what it takes to succeed. And anyways, he basically pointed out that in the economy, when you start playing around with these macroeconomic factors, right? This monetary policy controls, right? The interests of the institution don't align with the interests of the public. And so oftentimes politicians will put pressure on these institutions to continue granting access to cheap money and cheap loans and money printing, which are all inflationary, right? They will encourage that stuff because as a politician, right? I'm going to pick on the liberals. It's not anything personal against the liberals. All politicians, blue, orange, green, or red, will do the same thing. They might justify it for different reasons, but they all do the same thing. They want to spend money so they can give away goodies to their constituency, right? Whether it's, free this, free that, free the next thing, which is never really free, right? Every party's got their own pet project that they want to spend money on, right? They want to give away quote unquote freebies, right? But they do not want to increase taxes because we all hate taxes. Everybody hates taxes. Maybe hate's a strong word, but we all strongly dislike taxes. Even the loony people who are like crazy orange-haired people who absolutely believe in a very strong social safety net, or maybe even they're straight up communists, they don't like taxes. You go ask any of them honestly, at the end of the night when you're tacking that extra 13% onto their bill at the bar or at this not the grocery store, but at the electronics store or wherever, they will tell you, damn taxes, right? Always feels like I'm paying more for things I don't want than for things I do. And you get that a lot, especially from the socialist types, because they'll sit there and tell you, we should be spending the money on these things, which are important to me, But then those other things the government spends money on, which are important to other people, we should not be spending money on those things. So this is one of the reasons why politics is a really poisonous thing, because if you pay for the things you want, you get the things that you want. You ever notice that when you go to Walmart, nobody says you must buy this or that? You just go pick the thing you want. You spend your money on it. It's a fantastic system. And we should leave more decisions up to individuals. But because of this pressure from politicians, right, they want to have access to stealing money from you through inflation, because that's the way that they can tax you and give you free stuff without advertising that they're taxing you, right? Which is good for them, right? It's hard to get reelected when you say, hey, yeah, I'll give you all the stuff you want. You just have to pay for it. That is not a winning election slogan, right? It's a much better slogan to say, hey, I'll give you what you want, and either nobody has to pay for it, so in which case mostly the poor people have to pay for it, or we'll take it from the rich dude, which also usually means the poor people have to pay for it, right? Because to give you a perfect example, Justin Trudeau said exactly that. Hey, we've got this COVID thing. We're going to shut down the economy because we're geniuses. And don't worry about it. We'll make the rich people pay for it. We're going to give you all money. Just those rich people, they can pay for it. We're going to call it CERB. All right. So they gave out CERB. Well, first of all, who's the primary recipients of CERB? It was probably people who didn't need CERB in the first place. I'm sure there were a lot of college students who got CERB. They're on track to be the wealthier people in our society already. And a lot of them are already living off their parents who are relatively wealthy. So we shouldn't be subsidizing them at all. But I assure you, a large chunk of those people got CERB. I know some college kids who are on CERB for sure. Right? But even if we think about the poorest members of our society, the people who really needed CERB, right? Let's say you had a job thanks to the government, because, I mean, that's the truth. It was the government who shut things down. It wasn't COVID. Thanks to the government, you lost your job, right? And you were making, let's say, $2,000 a month. So very modest income, right? $24,000 a year. Maybe you and your partner, if you have one, are working. You're making $48,000 a year. You're as a couple, you're well below the average. As individuals, you're almost at the poverty line, right? So you're not doing super duper well. Excuse me. So we say, hey, we're going to give you $2,000 a month, $500 a week, sir. If I give you that money, you're living at the edge. So probably all of your money is going to rent, going to food, going to maybe transportation. If you have $100 left over at the end of the month, I'd be surprised. But if you do, you're probably wasted on lottery tickets or liquor or something else that's not really helping you get ahead, right? What happens when I give you that $500? Well, I'll give you a perfect example. You now pay your landlord for rent. Well, I'm the landlord. I don't need CERB, thankfully. I'm not rich by any sense of the word, but to that person who makes $24,000 a year, I'm a very rich person. To them, right? Relative to them, they would feel that I have a lot more than they do, and I do. Their money's going to end up in my pocket. Then they're going to go to Loblaws. It's going to end up in Galen Weston's pocket. Then they're going to go to Best Buy. It's going to end up in, I don't know who owns Best Buy, but right in their pocket. It's going to end up back in the hands of the wealthy people, because wealthy people know how to manage money. When you know how to manage money, money comes to you. Right? Poor people don't know how to manage money. That's what makes them poor. It's the primary thing that drives their poverty. Sometimes illness and that sort of thing does, but primarily it's because they're not good with money. So if you give them money, they're going to go spend that money immediately and give it right back to the wealthy people. And so when you do something like CERB, right? Well, what have you done? How did you pay out that money? Well, we did it through inflation, right? So inflation destroys savings, right? So who's that going to hurt more? Me? I'll tell you right now, I have very little savings, right? Any financial advisor would look at me and say, Aaron, you're crazy. You should have more money saved by now. And I would say to them, no, you're crazy. I don't save, I buy assets. That's a crazy thing to save money. What am I doing? Putting it in the bank account so the government can steal it from me? If I buy a house and the government steals from people, I get to keep the value of my house because the inflation goes into passive appreciation, right? If I have that money sitting in a bank account, then they just stole the money from me, right? So I have very little savings, but I have assets. They pay me. I improve with inflation, right? Inflation is actually beneficial to real estate investors, even though it is not beneficial to the economy. And I'd much rather live in a society that was not doing this experiment with inflation, even if it is in some small way benefiting me, right? But the cost now is that, okay, the inflation made Aaron richer on paper, because really the house is worth the same if we could value it in something like gold or something that's not moving with this inflation, right? he's doing better. But now that poor person who's making $24,000 a year, well, $24,000 a year bought $24,000 worth of things until we inflated the currency by 25%. Now $24,000 a year buys $18,000 worth of things, right? So that person is substantially poorer 1 year later after you've given them a few $1,000s. They get to remain that much poorer for a long time because their wages aren't going to keep. Wages do not move with inflation the way assets do, right? So it may take them years to get back to where they were. They're the people who suffer, right? But they don't understand, right? The way that this relates back to real estate investing is right now we're seeing a market trend. Interest rates up, housing prices down, right? I saw an article recently, and I can't confirm it because I don't pay close enough attention to Toronto, but it does seem right. Across the GTA, they've seen prices fall by $150,000 to $300,000. And in some circumstances, I am sure they've seen a fall greater than that because I think a lot of people got kind of greedy and they were listing properties at just unrealistic valuations, hoping they'd find the sucker. And so they're going to have to eat, maybe a $500,000 write down on price, but they were really 200 or 300 above where they should have been anyway. So you can't really call it a $500,000 price drop, but that's what we're seeing right now. Warren Buffett said, I said this last week, I'll say it again, right? Invest when others are fearful, be fearful when others are investing, right? Right now, people are afraid because they think interest rates are going to continue to climb, and they probably will. They don't want to get involved in the market, and so prices are falling. Now, going back to my Uber driver, supply versus demand, what is happening? Well, the demand for real estate has fallen off a cliff, not because there aren't people out there who can afford it, but because they're afraid to take action, right? It's psychological, not actual. Right? Going back to what I was saying about attitude versus aptitude, their attitude is they cannot succeed in this environment, so they won't even try. They've taken their ball and they've gone home, which leaves the field wide open for you to run down and score a goal on an open net. If you have got the vision and the resources, and when I say resources, I don't mean necessarily money, although money is great, but hustle can do it too, right? To go out there and acquire some of these assets in this environment, it might be somewhat difficult, right? The bigger the problem is, the larger the payoff, right? The bigger a problem you solve in the world, the larger the payoff you get. It's why when you buy a crufty house and you rehab it, you make more money than when you buy a perfect turnkey property, right? It's why when you buy an old beater automobile and you fix it up, you can resell it for more than you paid for it. But when you buy a brand new car off the lot, you can drive it for 5 kilometers and you immediately lose 30% of the value you paid for it, right? That's just one of the laws of life, right? And so we're in this very unique position right now with real estate, although it's true also in the stock market and basically across the economy. Right now, people are fearful. They're worried. First of all, we've been through 2 years of really unpredictable and scary economic times, especially where the government has been exerting influence that they absolutely should not have been exerting. That scares people, right? And moving into a period of high uncertainty where interest rates are rising. I mean, some people have lived their entire adult lives with extremely low interest rates, right? For 10, 15 years now, interest rates have been extremely, extremely low. Certainly since the 2008 crisis, the last crash, interest rates have been kept artificially low. And so there's a whole generation of people who were maybe 20 then, they're now 30. I mean, I'm basically a part of that generation, who've never really seen a high interest rate environment. They don't know what to expect and they're afraid, right? You have another group of people who may be a little older. They've maybe been through a high interest rate environment. Maybe they were just starting out in the 90s, but it's been a very long time and they don't really remember what that was like. They didn't have an accurate sense of what the marketplace was like at that time. Now they're sitting on the sidelines. And that means there's a fantastic opportunity for you to get involved, right? And for you to enter in, understanding that there's very little demand for the product, to make lowball offers and to get in front of a lot of sellers and say to them, hey, if you need to sell, I'm happy to buy if you'll give me the right price, right? And you're in a fantastic position to do that. Oh, where's my thing? You're in a fantastic position to do that because most people don't have the correct attitude to take action in this kind of environment, right? And they haven't, to go all the way back to a trained mind is better than any script. Most people in life are following a script. They're following a pre-programmed path that was set for them by their parents, by their teachers, by their government, etc., by their employer. They're not doing their own thinking, their own evaluation, finding their own route, right? One of the things I try really hard not to do on this seminar is to say to you, hey, this is what you do. I don't want to give you a path per se. Not because there isn't one. I mean, I can definitely tell you step by step what I do, right? But it won't work for you for a variety of reasons. One, because you're not me. Two, because the opportunities that are presented to me are not the same as the ones that are presented to you. What you need to understand is how I or anybody evaluates the opportunities and understands them so that you can evaluate the opportunities and understand them. And then you take action. You, for all we know, you'll have a strategy that'll be much more successful than the people that you'd seek to emulate. Now on the screen, yes, okay, so right now you can see I've got one property I analyzed. I want to take you through it really quickly, and then we'll call it a day, okay? This is a listing that was put up in Sudbury this week, actually. I would say it's an okay buy, but we'll go through it really quickly. So this is 3 and 5 ARiSE Street. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Air Street, whatever, in Sudbury, Ontario, and they're asking $885,000 for it, $884,900. Okay, it is a 6-plex, 6 one-bedroom units. Okay, 4 of those units have been recently renovated, and 2 of them have not been touched in a while. They're probably 15 years old or so. They're out of date. Says in the listing they need to be done. Okay, so you can expect to do a bit of work in here. Now they say you can bring value to this property by renovating those units. I'm not so sure about that, but let's go through it and see. So $884,000. If we put 20% down, which we can because the 6-plex will be treated as residential, but there's only a small handful of lenders that will do that. So you're going to have to work with a mortgage broker to get a mortgage for this property. Most of the conventional banks will not treat this as a residential. They'll treat it as a commercial property, right? In which case you'd have to put 25% down. But in this case, you put 20% down. You could put less, but you'll end up paying the CMHC. CMHC insurance is really, really expensive, so you try to avoid it when you can, right? You put 20% down. That means your down payment's $176,980. So $177,000 down payment. You could get an interest rate, an open variable rate loan right now for 2.49% is entirely doable. 2.75% is just a little bit of safety in case you don't have super excellent credit. And here I've analyzed it with a 30-year amortization. Okay, so it works out that it's about $2,883 per month mortgage payment. So very, very reasonable, right? $3,000 a month to afford the 6 units, right? I mean, a 1-bedroom in Sudbury is going for, $900 to $1,000 in that range. I mean, if they're nice units. So we're talking about a property with the potential to earn around $6,000 a month or so, right? So, $3,000 in mortgage, pretty good so far. We add in our, inspection, estimated legal costs. In this case, because of the price of the property, you're going to pay a 2% land transfer tax. So $14,000 goes to the government to close, and miscellaneous costs. I like to stick $2,500 in just for contingencies. So we have to add an extra $20,000 on to our down payment. It's going to cost you $197,000 to get into this property. So not the cheapest thing to buy up front. And this is why I was saying earlier, how much are you saving, right? If you really believe that you can do this, and I got to say, you absolutely can, right? If I can do it, you can definitely do it. You can definitely do it, right? If that's what you're seeking to do, how much are you saving? Because the reality is these things, they cost money, right? And the more you're saving, the faster you'll be able to afford your first one or your second one or your third one. And the more that you're able to save, and if you get into that habit of saving, right, when you buy this property and maybe a year from now you've got it stabilized and it's cash flowing, right? If you're in the habit of saving, then instead of spending that money from the cash flow, you're going to save it. And then that's going to help you build up your next down payment so you can get the next one even faster, right? And of course, that's a slow way to do it. It's even better if you can buy properties where you can cause some active appreciation and then refinance, because you can get the money out even faster, right? And that's going to help you to build your velocity of money, right? Get your returns going and help you to get the assets working for you rather than you working for the assets, right? But to make that transition, it starts with saving, it starts with being frugal, and it starts with understanding that you have to be able to be within a budget, because every business demands that you adhere to a budget, right? The business only has so much income and so much expenditure that it can spend based on that income. And if you go over that, yeah, you can tolerate a little bit because there's credit instruments and things like that. But at the end of the day, you're going to go bankrupt, right? So all business ventures, large and small, are about, on some level, the discipline of personal finance, right? And understanding that you have to live within your means, right? And preferably well within your means. So you have a margin of error, a safety cushion, or a savings rate, right? So anyways, this property, so you're about $200,000 to buy it, 197, right? I'm estimating, and this is probably high, I bet you could do it for about $40,000, but I'm going to throw in $100,000 for rentals, just for like the worst case scenario. Let's say you get in there, those 2 units are a complete mess, plus some of the work that's being done. And I don't know, do I have the pictures here? I can show you. Some of the work that's being done is like just absolute trash. I do have some, so you can see it. It's actually a very nice looking unit. If you're seeing the screen right now, you'll see fairly modern finishes, nice cabinetry. They've done a good job. It's light, kind of modern looking. That picture doesn't want to load. Neither does that one. Okay, I'm giving up on the pictures, but it's a pretty nice work what they've done so far. But let's just say you got to disrupt some of that. Maybe you find out you got to change some plumbing, you got to rip through some of those walls, etc., etc. Things spiral out of control. $100,000, right? Again, leaving a large margin here. Well, currently this property is being rented, so they claim. Remember, pro forma is Latin for lies, but currently they say it's being rented for $37.14 per month, so about $44,000 a year in rental income. You'll see very quickly this is not nearly enough money, right? When we put in our principal and interest, so our mortgage payment, that's $34,000 a year. So that only leaves us with $10,000 from the current rents to pay for all of our other expenses. We've got $4,500 a year in taxes, right? I estimate insurance to be about $2,100. Depending what's in that property, if you've got something like cast iron in there, cast iron plumbing, you could end up paying $3,000 for insurance. But most likely, I don't think the property looks old enough to have cast iron in there. It doesn't look like it's hard to say if it's old enough to have aluminum wiring. It probably doesn't have knob and tube, so probably you won't run into too many issues with insurance. We've got 6 units. I could not find photos of separate metering, and it does not say it's separately metered, so I'm assuming you've got to cover their electrical costs. You're looking about $600 a month for that. That's actually a little bit high. They'll probably all use around $80 a month, but it's hard to say, especially prices are going up, so we'll just assume higher costs. For water, the same thing, not $600 a month, sorry, probably around $400 a month or so. Water tends to be a bit less, but I've had some bad experiences with water in Sudbury, so you do have to watch out for the water and make sure certainly you don't have leaky toilets or anything like that, because those can actually end up costing you quite a bit. So then gas tends to mirror electricity, so again about $100 a month, right? It's obviously higher in the winter, drops off in the summer. We've got our property management fee, 8%, landscaping, factor that into about $1,000. So you can see there's not a lot of property that's going to require snow removal. There's just that one narrow driveway at the back. You should be able to get a truck to come in kind of in one pass and do it. So it should be relatively cheap to do your snow removal. And, assuming they don't get a lot of blizzards, and then they might have to actually remove the snow because they run out of spaces to pile it up in. So all of that totals out to about $5,000 a month in expenses, right? So if we're bringing in $3,700 and it's costing us $5,400, obviously this property is a loser. We tack onto that our vacancy rate, our repairs and maintenance. I put repairs and maintenance at 7.5% of your income, because I figure a lot of the units were recently renovated, so they won't need as much attention. But the property is not new, so it's not going to get that 5% like a brand new build would get. I put in tenant consideration. You don't need to. It's extra $120 a month in withholdings. So I'm now withholding another $500 every single month. So In total, I'm getting negative $2,000 a month in cash flow at 37.14. But remember, we've got the potential to be making 6,000. So, pardon me, at 6,000, which is $2,300 more than what I'm making right now, my net cash flow would actually be $120 to $200 per month, right? $2,400 a year. This property would break even kind of as is. And so we'll go down here to the return breakdown. $900,000 property valuation, right? If we get 1% gains per year, that's about $9,000 per year in passive appreciation, right? We're paying down that mortgage to the tune of $15,500 every year, so that's going into your pocket. So you put those two together, you're getting $24,000 a year from your principal and your passive appreciation. You're losing $26,000 in cash flow, right? Because at current rents, it would be costing you. But if you can refresh and get all of those units up to market rents, then you'd be making about $200. So I'd go up to $2,400 per year. And so our year two, because year one we've got our renovation costs in there. Our year two, we lose $1,000 with this negative $26,000 cash flow. So if we turn that into positive $2,400 cash flow, then actually we'd get $29,292 in return in year two, and then that would carry forward year three, year four, year five. As you're all well familiar, right? Every year our principal recapture increases a little bit, right? Your proportion of your mortgage you're paying off goes up year over year, right? So you're going to get a little bit more money. By year five, you're getting $17,000 from the mortgage pay down rather than $15,500. Passive appreciation is, of course, going to grow a little bit too. Also, over the course of those 5 years, you're going to have time to turn over tenants and keep increasing rents, right? We're currently in an environment where probably rents will go up with inflation. And so you're going to see those rents probably climb probably to $1,100 or so in the next year or two for a one bedroom in Sudbury. And so that will help you with your cash flow as well, right? Now, this property is a great example. I probably wouldn't buy it. I like to buy properties that look like great winners, because the reality is that, you know, a lot of the times you're overestimating a little bit how good you're going to perform. So taking something that looks like it's a great winner, what's the expression? If you shoot for the moon, you will land among the stars, right? This property is not really a moonshot. It's more like, you know, I'm just aiming at 20,000 feet or so. But if we take out that big expense of the $100,000 for renos, if we controlled that much better and we only did $40,000 worth of renos, right? And if we were really disciplined and good, and in that first year we were able to get our cash flow up to our rents up to around that $6,000 mark, then this property would actually perform quite well, right? And it'd be a perfect exemplar of what I was saying before about faith, right? You get into this property, that first year, you're not really going to see your money performing for you, right? If anything, it's you're sinking money into it, but then over time, you're making money on it. And here, even in this, which I would say, this analysis here, I made some assumptions that I would say are absolute worst case assumptions, right? I want to point out that without doing any funny math or anything, 10 years in, and I know 10 years is a long time, but nonetheless, 10 years in, if you had the faith and you only see 1% property value gains, which is completely unrealistic for the last 5 years in Sudbury, we've been seeing more than that. But if you only see that, 10 years from now, you would have a property that you made some money on. Not a lot, mind you. You'd have made $7,000, but you'd have made some money on it. By 15 years, you'd have made $33,000. By 20 years, you'd have made $78,000 on it, right? So not good enough. You wouldn't be beating inflation because it's about 1.2% average return on investment over 30 years. But it is to point out that a lot of these things are going to start out looking sour before they're able to turn sweet, right? Because the investment costs you up front and it pays off on the back end. And in this case of even a bad investment, it does eventually pay off if you hold the course and you have faith. Now, please understand, I'm not saying make bad investments and then just stubbornly stick to them forever. You know, there's something to be said for making a course correction. And like I was saying earlier, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, right? But it is to say that, one, as I've said many, many times before, if you make a mistake, if you buy the wrong property, it is not the end of the world. Hopefully, you're going to have a long and productive life. And if you don't, you're not going to care about this anyways. But hopefully, you'll have a long and productive life, and you will have time to recover from an error here or there, right? The biggest error that you can make is to not take action. Because by not taking action, A, you never get on the treadmill where maybe you got to get through year 1, 2, or 3 to get to years 10, 15, etc. to make a great return, right? And obviously, I've shown you many, many properties before. I'm just going to pick one at random here. Here's a Spruce Street. I don't even know if this is a good deal or not. I just clicked on it randomly. Let's see. This property was analyzed in 2021. So almost a year ago. At the time, this property was selling for $390,000. It was a triplex, two beds, and a 1 bed. Okay. And it looks like they have separate utilities. Here, look at this property. Actually, this is a pretty good property. So this is the kind of property I would probably be willing to buy, right? This is the kind of thing I would bet on. So it has a cash flow right from the beginning, negative $77. So you can do a little bit to improve that. You'd have made money. Certainly by now, a triplex can make a lot more than $2,650 per month. So you could have bought this and you could be positively cash flowing by now, a year later. That first year, I said you'd make $7,000. But the second year, you made $15,000. By year 10, you were making $18,000, $19,000 per year, right? Over the course of 5 years, you'd have made $70-something thousand on this property. A property that it would have cost you, how much did it cost to get into this property? It cost $88,000 to get into this property. So in 5 years, you'd almost have made all of your money back, right? So this is the thing, again, to reiterate, having faith, having a positive attitude. These are the things that are going to allow you to take those steps to work without reward for a time, right? Because that's what it takes, is to be investing and not seeing a return. And you have to have a plan, right? Again, I'm not saying just buy something random, although even that is not the worst strategy because it's better than not doing anything, right? But go out there, have a plan, and understand you've got to stick with that plan. You've got to have faith in that plan, and things will, in the long run, work themselves out in your favor if you're taking the right action, right? It's just like a diet, a fitness plan. You know, if you start a diet today, start eating salad and kale chips, you're not gonna be any lighter tomorrow. You probably won't even be much lighter next week. And maybe you'll be like 2 or 3 pounds lighter a month from now. It won't be much. But if you stick to it for a year, you'll be an entirely different person, right? And so that's really the thing, is having the faith to stick to it for a year and seeing what kind of different person emerges on the other side of all of that effort, right? It is absolutely worthwhile, and you're absolutely capable of doing it. Anyways, that's all I have to say this week. I hope it was beneficial. I will reiterate what I said at the beginning because not as many of you were here when we started. I've received feedback from some of you about the seminar. Certainly, about one of the feedbacks I got was about the way I capture the seminar. That analysis I just shared with you will not be available on the YouTube video that I'm capturing if somebody wants to go back and watch this later. I am working on a solution to that, so hopefully I will be able to get that all integrated into one video and have that recorded, for you to watch, for you to share with people. If you see something that's insightful and you want to send it to someone, the YouTube link that I send you every week can be used to share the videos with people. And hopefully that's something that will add value. I'm going to be working on a few different things here. I've got a lot on the go right now, but over the next couple of months, hopefully we'll be able to implement those improvements and really make this thing as good and as valuable to you as it can be. Also, I did share with you in the email my kind of very minor updates to my mortgage payment quick lookup table. But I did make some changes just to the way that it works and the way that it looks to make things a little bit clearer and make the formatting a little simpler for you. It's really, really a great tool just because it's very simple. It puts the table right in front of you so you can understand exactly what it's doing. and you can very quickly see without going through, the full analysis, like I was just showing you, just get a ballpark idea of, hey, is this a property I want to analyze? I want to look a little closer at. Is there potential here? Right. So I highly recommend, even if you're just having a conversation with somebody kind of casually and you're just trying to think through the numbers, if you're not good at doing that in your head yet, go pull up that sheet, bookmark it, whatever. It's on Google Docs, so it's very easy to access. You can plug in the numbers and it'll tell you right away what your mortgage cost is going to be. You can put in your taxes if you want and your insurance costs, and it'll basically tell you what your fixed costs on that property will be very, very quickly. It takes about a minute less really to plug in the numbers for a property on that sheet and see what you're going to pay. It obviously doesn't give you the more detailed stuff like land transfer tax and stuff like that, but it gives you a good rough idea, rough estimate. So please take action and work and labor in faith that you will be rewarded, because more often than not you will be, being hit by lightning notwithstanding. And I hope each of you have a fantastic day and a great week, and hopefully I'll see you again next week.